Welcome into the latest Betting Weekly Fast Break on this Monday. It's just hours after the regular season and postseason, the entire season was decided. The Oklahoma City Thunder are your NBA champions for the 2024-25 season. Welcome in. I'm Doug Kezirian alongside professional bettor Chris Macero, and we there's no sleep to be had as we look ahead to the futures market. We have the NBA draft coming up Wednesday night, and there are props to attack and other options on the betting board. But Chris, the Thunder were the favorites the entire postseason. They were favored in all 7 games in this NBA Finals, and they got there, but it was anything but smooth sailing.
No, it definitely wasn't. And, they benefited with the Halliburton injury. You got to say earlier in that game, I mean, he took the 5 of the first 7 shots. He was 3 of 4 from 3. He was hitting some deep threes. You could really feel the confidence in Indiana having him back. And you know what might have happened is he kind of might have forgot that he was injured because he was going full bore early, and no one really talked about the injury going into Game 7 as they talked about it going into Game 6. And maybe he just pushed the envelope a little too far. And unfortunately for him, and we talked about it, I was just really hoping this wasn't going to happen due to all these other type of injuries that have just been popping up with Tatum, with Curry, with Kyrie, all these stars, Dame Lillard, back to Durant, back to Kobe back in the day. These injuries to the big stars, it's just a shame. It would have been nice to see if they could have had their superstar clutch player down the stretch, if it would have made a difference. But hey, all the credit to OKC, stifling defense, all those turnovers in the third quarter, 27 points off turnovers after 3. Tough to recover from if you're Indiana.
Right, though. We discussed this when he first got hurt after Game 5, and you said something along the lines, I hope we don't see another Durant situation. And that's the unfortunate thing, is it's normally, a 2+ week recovery timeline, but the stakes are so high, the hunger, the desire to play and compete. It's hard to blame these players, but there's certainly a risk, and they knew it, and that's what happened. But I do. I'm not saying there's an asterisk next to this title, but I do wonder, just as a sports fan, what would have happened, because he was on one. It looked like it was going to be a special night. Only 5 minutes in, he's 3 of 4 from 3, like you mentioned, and it felt like these guys were going to be in this one to the end. They had a swagger, they had a confidence. Now stuff can dissipate. The OKC defense has been stifling all series, or for the most part all series, and you just wonder. I don't think it obviously would have been that lopsided. That's the thing that bothers me. But McConnell provided a lot of production, and they did make a little bit of a run, but it was a little too late. But the Thunder are worthy champion. They've answered the call throughout these playoffs, and they were the favorites, right? And we discussed so many betting options throughout. There was certainly some interesting betting outcomes throughout the series. Benedict Mathurin, Game 3 leading score, 50-1 at Bet Rivers. That cashed. Toppin was 50-1 for Game 6, and he came up oh so short, 20 points to SGA's 21, and he had the ball in the final possession, and they took a shot clock violation. But Toppin could have shot it, all things considered. So that didn't get there. I cooled off with the props personally. Holmgren is right there, just silly stuff, but that's what happened, especially in a Game 7. But the under was the right way across the board. What do you think odds makers will do the next time we have a Game 7 in the NBA Finals? Because they adjusted from 222 to 215, but this thing never threatened at all. And I know the Hallie injury certainly played a role, but man, the pace and everything was real low.
It's unbelievable that we aren't just max betting on this under. For the first time in the last 6 Game 7s in the finals, a team actually scored 100 points. I kind of lost track of it last night. I didn't think OKC even got to 100, but they did with all the fouling at the end. But the last 6 games in Game 7s, the last 5 before last night, neither team has reached 100, and they haven't even come close to 100. I mean, that Celtics-Laker game.
Wait, 96 was the benchmark.
Yeah. So the one following that was Houston and the Knicks, 90-84. San Antonio over Detroit, 81-74. The Celtics game in 2010 with the Lakers, where the Lakers, Kobe shot 6 for 24, and they won 83-79. Miami over San Antonio, Cavs over Golden State. These games aren't even coming close to 200 points. Last night we get to 194, but like you said, way under the total. As soon as Halliburton hit the ground, I was clicking the live betting under as fast as I could to get as much as I could get. And once they came back from timeout, it had already dropped from 219 to 215, and then it just plummeted from there. So someone asked me at some point, do you think 207 is still good? I go, yes, because this, you could just tell no one was able to score. Indiana went that stretch from the third quarter to the fourth quarter where they had 66 points. They finally got 2 points, and then they went another 6 minutes without scoring. It was just the drought of all droughts, and it's really obviously tough to come back from that, even though they put in a good effort in the fourth with Matherin, just taking control of the game and going to the hoop as much as he could. But when you're down 20 against OKC in that defense, that's pretty much an impossible task.
The second half total made it 203 for the game. And the live total during the third quarter, the first half of the third quarter, shots were falling. I think it got up to 208, 209. I was getting worried because I had the second half under pretty big as well. And then it got down and lower, and then it just died. It just so the crossing over the third and fourth quarters, the Pacers were outscored, I want to say 22 or 23-4. The start of the fourth quarter really did it in. The Pacers couldn't score for the first like 4 minutes. And it was an 8-0 run or something like that to start the fourth. And they closed the third, they being the Thunder, on like a 16-4 run or something like that. It was a 5-point game, and then it wasn't. And it got out of hand. It got up to 22 or 23 early fourth. So that's what did it in the total. And then the Thunder started bleeding the clock. But to your point, there was some fouling at the end. They started pressing with about 4 minutes to go, which is the right thing to do because you need to speed them up, and that's your only shot, just to, um, you know, your 1% shot that you have. But I'm curious to see what Oddsmakers going to do down the road because I know there was sharp money. I don't know for a fact, talking to Oddsmakers, that they took sharp money at 7.5 and 7 and things like that. Like the number came down, and it may have been the right side if Halliburton doesn't get hurt, but we forgot about it, and maybe Halliburton did too. I think that's a good point, Chris. But yeah, unders are the only way to go. And I said this on Friday's show. I was listening to a podcast, and early rounds, game sevens can be blowouts, but usually in the finals, the game sevens are close. And I think we were headed that way if not for the Halliburton injury.
Well, I'd also like to see how the game would have played out if the referees actually called traveling. I'm not going to complain about the fouling, but I mean, there's so many instances on both sides of the ball where they just refuse to call a rule in the game. I mean, basically gave OKC 5 free points at a very crucial time where Indiana played really good defense. The obvious travel by SGA where he dribbled the ball above his head. If that's not traveling or palming or whatever, I've never watched basketball before. He kicks it out to Dort for the miracle three. Then you have Jalen Williams. Not only does he take 3 steps anyways, but he lands with the ball before releasing it out of his hand for another 2 points. Just a real crucial part of the game. After that, the floodgates kind of opened. They hit a bunch of threes in a row, and it was off and running. But it just, and then even later in the game, you saw Matherin do the same thing. He took like 4 steps. I mean, why can't they just make that call? I don't. Everyone knows it's traveling. It's been traveling when you were growing up playing in rec ball or church league ball, and it's traveling in high school. It's definitely traveling in college. They love to call traveling. I just don't understand. They just make up a new phrase called the gather, and that means you can take 4 steps now. I just wish they would just call the game legitimately, and I think it would be a much more enjoyable game. I mean, why should you be able to do that thing that LeBron and Giannis does, where they basically run through the whole 3-point lane to the basket? I mean, it's hard enough to stop those two guys as it is. Shouldn't be able to do that. That's just one little complaint I have about last night's officiating.
Well, I don't call it typically, but I like the get off my lawn sort of portion of the show because I'm with you on some of that. It is what it is. I just as a sports bettor, I try to just go with the flow and whatever it is, and just sort of like awards betting, and that's what I want to shift to next. It like it's annoying of X, Y, and Z, but I embrace it and lean into it and try to monetize. And that's what we talked about with SGA. And I give the Bet Rivers odds makers so much credit. They had SGA's MVP odds going into game 7 higher than what OKC was on the money line. And that's what I would have done. I said, if you want to bet SGA, you're going to have to pay extra because I guess not that they were saying that there's a chance that he would win it as a losing team, but there was no one else at a chance. There's some guy on X who was saying Oh, it's going to be close. I'm like, he's not going to get a vote. Jalen Williams will not get a vote, and he didn't. It was unanimous, and it's just really comes down to the experience of betting awards and things like that. It's incredibly nuanced, or it can be, and I think you just have to be smart about it. Now, the Pacers options were certainly wide open, and McConnell was even getting some buzz during the game. He was playing well, and Siakam has played well for most of the series. But opportunities present themselves, Chris, in any shape or form, right? And SGA's finals MVP odds at some point in the series, when it was a 2-2 series, there were some minus 230s and 250s and things like that that made it intriguing.
Yeah, I mean, I got in after game five, um, when it was minus 550, and I was a little nervous going through the motions, game six and seven. But in the end result, it was a good bet. A lot of people talked about it going into game seven that why lay three something when you can lay two something with SGA. And I was 100% in agreement with you, especially after game six when Jalen Williams had a negative 40 net rating. And he played terrible that game. There was no way they were going to give somebody the MVP who had the lowest net rating in the history of the finals. It just wasn't going to happen. So SGA had a minus 17 as well in that game six. I actually did a little research on Michael Jordan. The lowest net rating, because everyone loves net rating, the lowest net rating Michael Jordan had in the playoffs, and I'm not sure if this is true or not, but it was what came up. It was a negative 10, which is pretty impressive in his career to never have any game lower than a minus 10. So, you see SGA MVP of the league, minus 17 in game six. It's just something that stands out. But you were right. That was a good bet in hindsight. They weren't going to give it to Jalen Williams. They were obviously going to give it to the team's alpha dog, SGA. He had a great series, a couple hiccups here and there, but overall, the best player in the series.
Yeah, league MVP as well. So record was set in the NBA in terms of first time ever. I don't know if it's a record per se, but for the first time ever, we have 7 straight seasons in the NBA with a different champion. And that is rare because it's a league known for predictability. It's a league known for only having a few teams that can win it. And yeah, the Thunder were plus 900 to win the title. Why was that? When you see them, oh, they were good all year. Well, the Celtics were the defending champs and reloading, right? And OKC had wet the bed in the conference semis last year. Yes, they added some pieces we thought would project well, but this was a team with an average age of 25.6 years old, the second youngest NBA champion in terms of youngest or average age ever. Bill Walton's 77 Blazers was the youngest. So when you have this youth, and we saw that youth rear its ugly head, so to speak, right? They go to 7 games with Denver after blowing game one. They blew game one against the Pacers here in the finals, and they needed 7 games to beat them. So there is an element of figuring it out, and the Thunder did that. But that's why they were plus 900 at the beginning of the season, because there were teams like the Mavs who had just gone to the finals. You also in the East, I eventually the Cavs became among the favorites, but um, they weren't going into the season, and there's always Laker money and things like that. So plus 900 certainly looks pretty good, and odds makers are not about to do that again. So with the 7 straight years of a different champion, we have the potential of the makings of a dynasty, because the Thunder are significant, overwhelming, whatever you want to call it, favorites for next year, because there's a distinct tier after them goes other teams. So Thunder are your plus 200 favorites at Bet Rivers. And then there's a jump to the Cavs, who are your Eastern Conference favorites. They're plus 800 to win it all. Rockets, who just added Kevin Durant yesterday, and then the Knicks are co-third favorites at plus $9. So the Knicks get boosted because of 2 key injuries in the East. One happening yesterday with Halliburton and his Achilles, and then also Jason Tatum and the Achilles. So there's definitely been a shakeup in the East. Then the drop to some Western Conference teams: Nuggets, Lakers, T-Wolves with the Magic from the East are plus 1,400. Of course, Orlando added Desmond Bain. They're the Celtics, your Celtics, Chris, that we don't really know a whole lot about. Pacers plus 3,300. Again, the Halliburton injury playing a major role, and many figure or expect Indiana to lose Miles Turner in the offseason, their starting center. So Mavericks will have Cooper Flag, we assume. And then the Spurs are making some noise at 24 to 1. Anything stand out on the betting board to you in terms of this sort of new landscape of the NBA with the Thunder, the significant favorite or the at least consensus favorite, and then all these other teams sort of new age with all these dominoes that are starting to fall this summer with injuries and then the Durant trade.
Well, I mean, Cleveland has to be pretty excited. I mean, they were talking about, are they going to break it up? What are they going to do? They're going to need to get better to beat all these teams. Maybe they don't have to now. It's basically the same team. You're getting plus 800 in the middle of March or April. They were like plus, 500 to win the championship, which is kind of bizarre that they're pretty much the same team. They had some injuries going into that Pacers series, so maybe they just got a little unlucky with the injury bug. You got to look at Denver. I mean, Denver gave OKC the best run for their money. They were right there in a game 7. They're at 14-1. They have the best player in the world still. They probably need a few more pieces, obviously, because they were playing with a 3.5-man team. A little bit farther down the board, I liked the possibility of a longer shot with the Detroit Pistons. I mean, they were one game away from beating the Knicks. They were a three-pointer and a foul, a missed call by the referee from possibly beating the Knicks. And if you figure they have a young team, they have the Thompson brother, they have Cade Cunningham, they have Durant, they have a lot of pieces. Malik Beasley, maybe they're a veteran leader away or a veteran pickup away this offseason from really competing. And if you look at some of the MVP odds for next season, the number one guy for the East is Cade Cunningham. Everyone else is on the Western side. Everyone else ahead of him, odds-wise, is in the Western Conference. So that was just something that caught my attention. I really liked how the Pistons played last year. I really liked how they weren't afraid to play the Knicks. And it's just something at a bigger odds. I'd like to, take a stab at that. That's something that'll probably be a lot less as you go forward in the second half of next season. Some of these shorter prices, like the Houston Rockets, I'd be steering clear away from them. Maybe they win it this year, but it's pretty much has to be this year or bust, because Durant making $55 to $60 million a year each of the next 2 seasons. Every time he comes to a team recently, the team's in disarray in 18 months. Just not sure that Durant is the answer. And I guess they didn't give up much. Jalen Green, undersized guard, can't really shoot that well. They gave up the number 10 pick, but I think this is a pretty loaded draft. You might be able to get a really solid player with the 10th pick in the draft. I recall Paul Pierce was the 10th pick in the draft. So I just think that's a little too short on Houston. And, if you wanted to take a little bit of a flyer on an Eastern Conference team that might have a shot, was in the playoffs this year, played well, has a superstar player, Detroit Pistons at 40-1, 50-1, might be worth a little sprinkle of money.
Look, I talked about the Cavs at the beginning of the season at 50-1. Adding Kenny Atkinson, I thought would be a giant coaching upgrade, and he won the Coach of the Year award as a 20-1 long shot. So at least that ticket cashed. But I agree with you. And you mentioned the draft. We're going to talk draft props in just a moment, but this summer is expected to be wild and a lot of player movement, whether it's free agency, trades. So this is when you can scoop up some nice futures. And look, I haven't pulled the trigger yet. I did get a text this morning from a sharp NBA bettor, and he did. He bet the Philadelphia 76ers. He says these odds are out of whack. With Halliburton and Tatum's injury and the East being wide open, it's a giant if. But if Embiid can play, even if he just plays the playoffs, they have a structured roster around him where the Sixers, with Maxey and other pieces in there, 33-1 doesn't seem right. And I do like their coach, Nick Nurse. 33-1 doesn't feel right for a wide open Eastern Conference, but the teams ahead of them are, in fact, better in my eyes, in the East, that is. But it does make you wonder if the Bucks are huge long shots, but are they going to lose Giannis for sure? I mean, doesn't Giannis give them a shot? 55-1 for the Bucks too. Just the problem is with Dame's injury, and they're so bad defensively. But if players can start demanding they'll play with Giannis in Milwaukee, unlikely to happen. It's likelier that the opposite will happen. He'll want his way out. But some of these long shots are certainly interesting for me, at least.
Well, the one thing I'll give you for the Sixers is the team that the Sixers can't beat is the Celtics. And obviously, with Tatum out, that's going to change possibly this year. But I bet a lot of golf, and there's guys I do not bet in golf. Patrick Cantlay, Colin Morikawa. I do not bet those guys. And I do not bet the Philadelphia 76ers for futures. This team is a joke. Embiid is a joke. They have not even gotten to the conference finals, let alone the NBA finals, let alone winning the NBA finals. So save your money. Philadelphia 76ers are not going to win the title. You can stamp it, bookmark it. We can run this back a year from now. The Sixers will not win the 2026 NBA title.
Like I said, I haven't pulled the trigger, but I do understand. I think the key for me that got me considering this time last year was their coach, right? Bringing Nick Nurse in changes things. I would not do it with Doc, and that's why I'm not really considering Milwaukee when I mentioned it. I do think because look, the Pacers just made this huge run, and I know some injuries broke their way, but the summer is supposed to break a lot of ways, so it keeps it open minded. And you mentioned the Knicks. What are they? The tied for the third favorite, and they don't even have a head coach right now. And on Bet Rivers, you can bet on their next head coach. This has been going on a couple of weeks since firing Tibbs. Under the basketball section, you scroll down under all the FIBA stuff. There's an NBA specials section as well, and that's where you have the index bet for the Knicks' next head coach. And I chuckled at this because Mike Brown is the betting favorite, even money favorite. And I chuckled because I'm a Laker fan. I hated when they hired him and stuff like that. Now he's a defensive coach. That's his pedigree. So I can understand the allure, but so is Tibbs. So you fire Tibbs and you're going to pay him 30 million more just to hire Mike Brown, who's been fired everywhere he's been. This does not make sense to me. I do think Dolan fired Tibbs not having a replacement, obviously, or not thinking he was going to be able to pry a coach away from a current team. But he thought that the environment in the locker room had been lost, and that's during the exit interviews he made that decision. So the question is, after being rejected, firmly rejected in some cases, reportedly by a lot of teams about interviewing their head coach, do you see a betting option here on the index bet for the Knicks head coach?
If I'm a Knicks fan, I'm bringing back Jeff Van Gundy. It's not even a question. The guy's already coached in New York. He was successful in New York. He's an absolute defensive wizard right now, coaching for the Clippers. Whether he wants to come back, whether the ownership and Leon Rose want to bring him back, that's two totally different things. I'm not sure. A lot of these guys don't even want to deal with this ownership group. I mean,
Right.
what more could Tibbs have done? I mean, they've got to the farthest they've got in 30 years, and the guy gets fired. The roster, yeah, it's good. The core is good, but they need a lot more depth, or they need a coach that's willing to work in the bench a little bit more. As we know, Tibbs wasn't much of a working in the bench type of guy till it got too late in the playoffs, and he's running out lineups that they hadn't seen all year. But I mean, Steve Nash, Calipari, Van Gundy is a proven commodity, and he's coaching. I mean, his defensive sets for the Clippers turned the Clippers into one of the best defensive teams in the second half of the season this year. I mean, that is such a no-brainer move for me if I'm a Knicks fan or if I'm the ownership group. Whether they can work it out, whether there's bad blood from the past, I don't know any of that stuff. But I mean, that was just an obvious pick for me for Van Gundy, and at 17-1, that's worth a flyer because he's the best coach out of that whole entire group. Mike Brown, total waste of time. That's just going to be a clown show. You come. I bet you he'd be in there for a year. He'd be fired after next year. So I don't know why they would even think about bringing him in. The ex-Memphis coach, maybe, but what was going on in that locker room? He had a tough situation dealing with the John Moran off the court stuff. Maybe he's not the Taylor Jenkins, probably not the guy you want in New York City. He doesn't feel like the New York City fit for me. I would be all over Van Gundy.
You alluded to it. I just want to remind our viewers or in our audience that in case they didn't know. So he is an assistant coach in the league right now with the Clippers. He's sort of their defensive coordinator. So he's already familiar and plugged into the league. He's not just on a beach after his time with ESPN as a color analyst expired. So he's locked in. He was an advisor. Then he became a permanent fixture on the Clippers bench, and he's been outstanding. So I echo your sentiment. I just don't know if he wants the job. And some of these other guys are at different stages of their career. It'd be interesting if Mark Jackson actually got hired. But I agree. Plus 1,700 at Bet Rivers is certainly a worthy play for this index. And we just want to remind you, we are a free show, but we need your currency, and that currency is likes and subscribes. Please go do that here on the YouTube channel. Like and subscribe. It helps us with all the analytics and algorithms and everything like that. So it really helps. Also, what helps is the Betting Weekly newsletter. Go sign up, bettingweeklystudios.com. You get a bunch of previews for like soccer, tennis. It's 30 something pages. It's great content. Also, links to podcasts like this on the Bet Rivers Network, and also tons of Bet Rivers odds. So sign up at bettingweeklystudios.com. Chris, I mentioned the NBA draft is just a couple days away. No rest at all for anyone. No days off, as Bill Belichick would say. And draft betting is interesting. Just like the other sports, just like the NFL, it's just a different animal. And I think it's a race for information, but mostly I think another thing is to remember it comes in tiers. And so understanding the tiers of each draft really helps you make EV bets or expected value bets, positive ones, and really understands because there's no, this isn't binary. Like there's a domino effect to a different team passing on a guy or another team trading up or just whatever domino effect, like the Durant trade, certainly the fact that the 10th overall pick switched teams yesterday. So there's elements of this. And sometimes you can just put yourself in a really good position. And I think we have some opportunities for that. So first things first, Cooper Flag is expected to go number one. And then number two is, was those two Rutger guys. Now it's just Dylan Harper. He's expected to go to the Spurs unless they make a trade for someone, and who knows, and they surround Wemby with more talent, things like that. So in all essence, the draft starts at 3. And a month ago or so, it was supposed to be, Ace Bailey for sure. But now he's refusing workouts. He's so young. He's 18. He's rubbed people the wrong way. The people representing him have rubbed people the wrong way. So it looks like Bailey is falling. Are you buying this? I mean, because sometimes talent is just too much to turn down, and teams will say, "We'll figure something out." But Bailey was supposed to be the 3rd overall pick, and that's no longer the case according to all the mock drafts right now.
Yeah, Ace Bailey, he's, like you mentioned, he's only 18 years old, but he's a very immature 18 years old. You could see it on the court this season. You could see it in the post-game interviews. He's just he's obviously an immense talent, big guy, 6'10". He's the ability is obviously there, but a lot of immature factors, and I think that's why you're seeing him slip. Now, based on the odds, the Philadelphia 76ers have the 3rd pick. And based on the odds, VJ Edgecombe seems like a lock for the 3rd spot. But I'm not so sure the Philadelphia 76ers are going to be the ones making this pick. It doesn't make sense for them to add a 3rd smaller size guard, Edgecombe 6'4". They already have McCain at 6'3", and Tyrese Maxey at 6'2". Where exactly does he fit? I love Edgecombe. I think he's going to be one of the better players in this draft. He's got that smooth, like mid-game. He gets his way into the paint. He's not a big 3-point guy. He's kind of like a smaller version of SGA. He's just a really talented guy, great ball handler. He was, really good at Baylor this year. He led a Baylor team that didn't have much else. Almost, decent run into the tournament. So I just feel like someone else is going to probably trade up for this pick. There's a lot of teams below the 3rd spot that could use a VJ Edgecombe to lead their team. I feel like the Sixers are already kind of set at that position. They may be able to trade down, get some draft capital, maybe pick up, one of the other guys. I don't know if, they want to go for, or they could maybe go for a bigger guard. They could go for, Trey Johnson, who's probably the best NBA type shooter in the draft. So, I don't know. I feel like Edgecombe's going to go 3rd, but I'm not sure if it's going to go to the Sixers. So if you're betting that pick, make sure you bet it correctly. Make sure you don't just bet the Sixers are going to make that pick. Make sure you're betting that the 3rd pick is going to be Edgecombe. So I believe he is going to go 3rd, just not sure it's going to be to Philly.
I mean, Philly has Maxey and then Jared McCain, who was outstanding last year until he got hurt. So that is certainly part of the equation for all this. And this goes back to the tiers. Like, I think Edgecombe's in that second tier after the first two picks in terms of um, expected outcome versus like almost virtually guaranteed. So I see Trey Johnson as a guy that some mocks are going, and that's the thing with this. Odds makers don't really know. They're just basing it on information they're hearing and mock drafts. And so you have the same tools as a better than the odds makers do. And I think that's really important to keep in mind. And sometimes these odds don't adjust enough. So if Trey Johnson's plus 550 to be the third overall pick, and I'm looking at CBS Sports Line, their main draft guy has Trey Johnson going there. These are sort of little mini flyers you can take and go from there. I think another component, okay, so fourth overall pick, if it's not the guys we've mentioned, whether it's Trey Johnson or VJ Edgecombe, then it's Con Knipple, who's climbing boards like no other. He's got an athletic family, 6'5", so he's got great size. He's the favorite right now at plus 175. So Edgecombe would be a double whammy, right? For him not to go number 3 overall, currently a minus 250 favorite, and then for him also to go fourth exactly at plus 250. Ace Bailey's lurking in all these boards around this pick. I think Knepel, the better way to play him, and obviously plus 175 is a very desired outcome, but we still don't know. Like, we're hearing a lot of buzz, but stuff changes, as you know. So his over under is 5.5 minus 132. I initially thought there's no way he slips past 5, but there is. There is. What typically happens, we have to remember in these drafts, teams may want to slide down, but they may not have a trade partner. And then what are they going to do? Just not take a guy because some big boards had their guy 7 and they drafting 4th or something like that, or their guy 9th and they're drafting 4th. So we might see reaches around here if they absolutely love a player. Scotty Barnes a few years ago was taken ahead of Jalen Suggs. Many people didn't see that. That was like a 10-1 long shot. So Knepel at 5.5 under 132 gives you a lot of wiggle room for even 3, but 4 and 5. What do you think about that?
Well, he's obviously the safe pick, Charlotte, right there next to Duke. So, but Charlotte might be moving up to get VJ. So I'm not sure. You can say safe pick because if Charlotte does keep the pick, that's the safe pick. Everyone's familiar with him. He played right up the road at Duke. But you got to look at the Charlotte team. They didn't have a center play more than 44 games last year. Mark Williams was the center. We all know about him. He got traded to the Lakers, got traded, they sent him back. They have no big men at all. So I would think this team would be looking at some sort of a big man at some point. And what's in the water down in Charlotte? No one played more than 70 games. Seth Curry paid 68. Mia Butte, I think is how you say his name. He played 71. No one played anywhere remotely close to a full season in Charlotte. Very, very, very weird. But again, they have no big men at all. No big presence. I mean, I would look at Maliuk or another Duke player who's just been rising up the boards, 7-footer. He's only 18 years old as well, or a little older freshman, Derek Queen, as a long shot play from Maryland. And I've heard some people in the NBA say if Derek Queen was coming from Slovakia and was a white guy, he'd probably be the number 1 pick in the draft. But because it's a
Really?
different style in the NBA, he's just viewed coming out of college. He's viewed differently. This guy has. I'm not saying he's not Jokic yet, but this guy has handles for a 6'10" big man. He can handle the ball. He can shoot the 3. He's a monster down low. He totally led this Maryland team to a deep run in the tournament. I've been a big fan of his the entire season, and whoever gets him is going to have the steal of the draft. Now, obviously, that's a little high to be probably on most mock drafts. No one probably has him going 4th, but that Maryland's not too far from Charlotte. They've seen this guy play. He's just a very impressive big man. For a team that has no big men at all that have contributed much of anything, I would think they'd be looking for someone of his stature, his size, or the Maliu kid from Duke as well, who was a force throughout the whole tournament. So just 2 younger guys, big men, potential. I just think I'm not sure because Con Knipple, does he really move the needle? I know he's a high basketball IQ. and he can do a
So he's
lot of
got the
things.
highest floor of a lot of guys. That's the thing. He's safe, like you
Yeah,
mentioned.
definitely the safest pick. He's going to be able to shoot the three. He's going to be able to rebound. He can handle the ball. I'm just not sure he's going to be a superstar type of player. Like, what's his
Uh-huh.
ceiling? 25 minutes? Is his ceiling 25 minutes a game, 16 points a game, 5 rebounds? I don't see him being like a 25-point scorer in the NBA. And a guy like Queen or Maliuch, I think, could have a bigger impact for a longer time in the NBA. Just with much higher upside with the two big men.
So I agree with what you're saying. And that's the hard part about betting this stuff. Are you betting your own opinion? Or are you betting what you're reading and taking a leap of faith with that some front offices are not leaking out certain information and keeping things close to the vest? Because I agree with you. To a certain extent, I don't love Queen. His defense is a big issue, but you're right. They're making the Sengun slash Jokic comparisons. You can run an offense through him at the high post. He had that game winning shot in the tournament where he drove and then went glass. And his draft position's 11 and a half. But based on all the mocks, I actually think there might be value over 11 and a half because you're not betting rookie of the year odds. You're not betting how these guys are going to produce and project. You're betting what teams are going to do. So maybe to your point, scouts agree and they see what you see and that they're just not telling other teams because they're hoping he falls to them. So maybe 11 and a half under would be like a slam because he's probably going to go like 6 or 7. I like Maluwak as well. I think he's fantastic. I read that the Lakers could potentially be making a trade for him, giving up Dalton Connect in like a 3-way deal. So, but 7.5, Chris. I got to be honest. I mentioned a little bit ago about tiers, and there's tiers, right? So you have the top two guys. Well, okay, one is guaranteed, then another tier two is like very likely, and then 3 through kind of 5 are we know 3 through 6, we know 3 of those 4 picks. So really with Maluak, and he's awesome, but I actually think the value's on the over, and it might be my favorite play just because teams are kind of dumb at times, and I think he can only go 7, maybe 6. And I just think so once you get to that tier of like 6 to 10, you see guys drop to like 16 because there's so many guys that can sneak in and things like that. So you have like 9 guys for 3 draft positions, sometimes how this works. And then once you get to like 11, 12, then you have another tier of guys. And once you get to that tier, a GM at like the 12th pick will just take a guy that others have in the 20s because it's all kind of a wash, right? The farther you get away from the top pick, so early in the first round, much more predictable than later in the round, in the middle round. So as much as I love Maluwak, based on what I'm reading, I think over 7.5 is a really good bet.
Yeah, and the consensus
Now, do you
mock drafts
understand
that I've
the
put
torture of
together.
going with opinion versus information?
Oh no, I'm just saying in the consensus mock drafts that I put together, looking at this morning, he's not even in the top 10. But I also heard there's a huge push for him to go to Washington, which is the 6th pick. I don't see him going to New Orleans. I just don't think that's a landing spot for him. So, based on your analysis, does he go to Washington or he's going over the 7.5 draft position? So maybe you take it both ways. There's a lot of opportunity to make money in these draft boards because you're getting a lot of plus money in both spots. You could maybe play, exact pick Washington at 6, or you play over the 7.5 draft spot. Granted, he could go to New Orleans. We could lose both bets, but that's the gamble. So I just think he has a high upside talent. He's only 18 years old. He's a 7-footer. He's not one of those 7-footers who's clumsy. The guy is just a freak athlete at that size. And I think he's going to be a big time NBA player for a long time, especially on the defensive end. Just unbelievable at the glass.
Yeah, and he had all those alley oops too. Look, I love him. I really do. That's the thing. I'm so torn because I project him higher than he should as a guy who's watched a decent amount and researched this. But to your point, yeah, you can do that. So he's plus 500 at Bet Rivers to go exactly 6th, which would be Washington. Now, like you said, you can lose both. That's why I got to be careful with some of this stuff. But I think the draft positions don't move enough as information comes out. Another guy I have, but he's climbing the board. So I'm probably going to lay off of it. But it's Noah Asenge, who's the second youngest player in this class, only behind by 3 days to Cooper Flag. and he's been doing really well overseas, and his team's playing deep, so he hasn't been able to work out. So this kind of reminds me of something when there's just it just takes one GM to love you. And I think he may have one GM that absolutely loves him. But over 9.5 for a guy who could go 15 is tempting, but he could also go around 6, 7, 8. So that's why it's torturous in a lot of ways. But if you do enough of these, then you said you have protection, and then things can fall a certain way where you scoop up all the bets.
Well, there's always a foreign guy that most people are not aware of that sneaks into the top 10, and everyone's like, "Whoa, wow, whoa!" We're all shocked, and that, like you said, just bumps everyone else down. So, I mean, if you have information that that might happen, go for it. I'm not too familiar with his overall game and makeup. I'm not sure where he's going to fall or who he fits with. The couple of players that I was most impressed with this year in college basketball, and one of them is a foreign guy, is that Igor Demin out of BYU. He's one of the best shooters I've seen in college basketball. He has an NBA type release. He gets separation and his shots off like no one in the college game. Probably the second best shot maker besides Trey Johnson from Texas. So I look for him. I'm not sure what his over under is, but I'm going to be looking at it a little bit
14 and a
more
half.
tonight. What is it again?
14 and a half.
Yeah, I would look to go. I think he's going to go under. He's going to be drafted before the 14th pick. You can't teach this type of release, separation, and all a tremendous shooter that he is. Igor Demin, I really like that to go under 14 and a half.
And that's sort of the tiers I was talking about. Guys with an over under 14 might go 14 and a half might go 9, and a guy with an over under of 9.5 might go 20. And that's the thing you have to this is not that predictable. Every year's different, every sport's different, but really every year's different. And that it's all about the tiers. And at a certain point, like Chris was talking, I mean, this is the method to the madness. If you think the Pelicans will skip a guy and don't need any need for him, barring a trade on draft day, especially if you wait to bet this, you'll have more data points. But you can sort of know that the exact spot of a guy is really important. And that's why there may be ways to sort of build a portfolio. Let me ask you this, Chris. You mentioned you watching a bunch of college hoops. How about Illinois' Kasparis Yakashonis? 11 and a half. I love the under. I think he's a guy that teams are going to want, and all the mocks have him now. It's 162, but I think there's good value still.
Yeah, see, this is a guy like I'd rather have Derek Queen. I've seen this guy play. He's in and out of the lineup a lot. A lot of he had the mystery injury or illness. Um, this Illinois team last year, they were really an enigma. Sometimes they looked like the best team in the country. Other times they were just a total train wreck. I know a lot of that had to do with this mystery illness that was going through the team. I mean, yeah, this guy's a good shooter, good passer, all around high basketball IQ. I almost, for some reason, I think I'd rather have Queen than him. That's just my personal opinion based on watching enough basketball that I did this year for college.
And that's the other thing is sometimes, and that's what these GMs look at. It's like as you get farther away from the top pick, right? It's worth taking the shot, right? Giannis in a year that had a kind of a weird draft, the Bucks just took him in 13ish around there because they said the upside is off the charts. We don't know, let's take a shot. So Queen's upside is probably higher than Yakashonis's, but who's a better fit like day one? Like those are things. Now you can have either or, right? But these are things that stick out. Where do you stand on Fears out of Oklahoma? This is a pick that's really kind of puzzling me. Jeremiah Fears. I've seen him as high as 4, then 7, 8, 9, and his over under is 6.5. But if you look at the over under, like he's supposed to go quote unquote 6, right? He's plus 245 to be in the top 5. Okay. It's decent underdog money, right? And then the sixth pick to go exactly 6, he's plus 450. So how is his over under 6.5? Like, see, that's the stuff where it can get interesting and you can build yourself a little portfolio and position yourself. But Fears, I think, is going to go, but you could also go 10. So I feel like there's value on over 6.5 if you play 5 and 6 exactly.
Well, let's roll back to that Giannis draft for a second. You just said high upside versus the safe pick. Well, the pick before Giannis, the Boston Celtics took the safe pick. Kelly Olynyk, still in the league, still safe, still made probably like $200 million in his career. Pretty big mistake, Danny. Pretty big mistake. As for Fears, I feel like Fears is oh man, he's kind of small size. He's just like a rocket all around the court, but he can't shoot. And I don't see how any chance he gets drafted in the top five. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just don't see it. He's a spark plug type of player. He's push the pace, 100 miles an hour, gets into the paint, but he's not a good shooter. And at that high a draft pick, you got to be able to shoot the basketball to be drafted. And this is a really good draft with a lot of good shooters. So I cannot see him being top five. I feel like any team that takes him top five, or that would be a disastrous pick and a big setback for the franchise. So that's just my opinion. Nothing against the kid. I liked him. I liked him at Oklahoma. He was just super spark plug type of player, but I don't see him as a top five pick, especially in this draft. With a lot of quality shooting in this draft and size in this draft.
Strong, coming strong there at the end. I like it. Fierce. I mean, look, over 6.5's on the board. The question is, do you trust the front offices to see what you see? Like, let's say you quote unquote are right. All right, do you need other front offices to be right as well? That's the headache of drafting or betting the draft. So good to end on that front. But these are all good conversations. I like Fears over as well. Maybe I'd give myself a little protection at the 6th pick, things like that. But we've talked about 5 guys going in picks 3 through 5, right? So that's the thing, is you can create value, and if there's a huge wild card and you have overs and all these guys, then you can scoop a bunch. So
Well,
things to keep in mind.
I don't think there's any chance that Ace Bailey. Well, so when it gets to the 5th pick, you have Ace Bailey or Trey Johnson, and Danny Ainge is taken. I know Danny isn't 100% in charge now; his son's in charge. But Danny Ainge is taking Ace Bailey or Trey Johnson. And if he takes Ace Bailey, he knows he's immature. He wants to keep him out of the big city. He wants to keep him under wraps. He's only 18 years old. He's going to develop him because Utah is not competing anytime soon. Just it is not. The West is just too difficult. They were tanking for Cooper Flag. That didn't work out. But Ace Bailey, that's a nice compensatory pick for Danny. And if not him, they're definitely taking Trey Johnson. So if you look at the odds on those two players for the 5th pick, I think you could play them both, and they're both plus money, and you're going to walk away a winner. I mean, granted, if there's some shenanigans earlier in the draft and they don't draft Edgecombe, but I can't see Edgecombe not going 3rd. I just don't think it's going to be to the Sixers. But I think both Ace Bailey and Trey Johnson are going to be around for the 5th pick, and Danny Ainge is going to take one of them. Probably Ace Bailey.
Good stuff. Okay, so we mentioned a lot of chatter there. It was fun and we'll have much more of this on tomorrow's show as well. I know, Chris, you're not on the show, but we're going to get some more insight, and then things will happen between now and then where the odds will change as a domino effect, of course. But this is the beauty of the draft. It's a race for information, and that's how we sort of attack this stuff. So Albert and Wynn will be in the show tomorrow. Chris, you're doing some hardball tomorrow with me. So you and I will talk baseball. And again, that's Betting Weekly Hardball, Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Eastern, right here on the Bet Rivers Network and under the Betting Weekly umbrella. So Chris and I will talk baseball tomorrow. Albert will be in the show tomorrow with me, and we're going to discuss the 4 WNBA games on tomorrow night's card, but also some more draft betting. So for Chris Macero and everyone behind the scenes who does such an awesome job for us, I'm Doug Kezirian, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.